We begin the news at this hour in Southern Africa, where South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa on Friday told an inquiry that the July 21 riots of 2021 and looting in two major provinces targeted the country's economy. At least 350 people died in the violence in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng after former President Jacob Zuma was jailed for contempt of court. Ramaphosa said that the riots, which cost the nation some 50 billion rand, which is about $3.3 billion, must never be allowed to happen again. He added that investigations to finding the suspected masterminds behind the riots were still ongoing.
It was a humiliating moment for many of our people. It's something that we regret deeply. Worst of all, for hundreds of people, the right to human dignity and to life itself was cruelly taken away. Now, even as we are here to examine the circumstances that led to what happened last July, the many lives lost is the greatest indictment of all. Now, as a country, we mourn those who lost their lives because they were somebody's parent, they were somebody's child, yes, they were somebody's brother or sister, and they were somebody's relative or friend. And we think also of those who are still living with the physical as well as the mental scars of what they saw and what happened to them. We affirm our responsibility as the state to implement with haste the remedial and various corrective measures that are needed to make sure such events are not possible in the future. And these hearings form, in my view, an integral part of the healing process that we must go through. It's cathartic, but at the same time, we've got to go through this healing process to get to that moment of healing. We also know there can be no healing without justice. We will spare no effort to ensure that the instigators and perpetrators of the violence are brought to book.
Now, joining me on NC Continental Prime this evening to look at this development are two gentlemen, Hart, the Executive Chairman, Impact Investment Africa, and Clive Ramathibela-Smith, a business and market analyst at Hectare Capital and Partners. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining, Chris and Clive.
Thank you very much for having us. Appreciate it.
Now, I'd like to start with Clive. How would you describe the level of economic impact of last year's riots on South Africa's economy?
To be fair and honest, I think that it has always been a ticking time bomb. And I'm sure my colleague Chris will agree with me on this one, that for many a times we've been talking about the instability and the fastly growing disengagement between communities in South Africa, the high percentage of inequality, and just the high unemployment rate. By the way, just this week, it went up again by another 4 points. So that just shows you that we're sitting on a ticking time bomb. And so events like those, if not managed appropriately, we'll have even more of them in the future rather than less, because obviously an economic imbalance that is experienced by South Africa by no means is something to be taken lightly. It is unfortunate that the after effects, only then the president reflects on the realities of what they were supposed to have handled. They didn't do it sufficiently enough. And even as we speak right now, South Africans are very upset. And there's a very nice term, I don't know if I'm allowed to use this on television, but it's an Afrikaans term that means that people have had enough. And Chris will know exactly what I'm talking about. So it's very, very disappointing. It's sad, but it's the reality of an economy that's not stable, that's shrinking, and also high unemployment, deep strides of poverty, and unequal, the most unequal economy in the world.
Now, before I move to Chris, Clive, you did say the ticking time bomb is still there. So this fault lines is still there, regardless of what President Ramaphosa said, that this would never happen in South Africa again.
Our president has dreams. Our president does not realize the reality of what's going on at the bottom end. The president does not realize that people are living in dire poverty. And, you know, two things that have exasperated the situation. One, you have a pandemic that South Africa was the most strictest of all African countries when it comes to restrictions on COVID. I don't understand why he did that, because it's not like we had the highest rates across the world. No.
Yeah, but South Africa did have the highest rates in Africa.
That it affected us. So those things have not been taken care of. And unfortunately, the ticking time bomb, ask Chris right now, this is Operation Dudula, which is already starting in the townships where people are chasing foreigners for no apparent reason. That's all frustration. It's nothing to do, certainly, with the fact that this has been handled appropriately. Dudula now, they've got a force. They're in every province now. They're trying to tackle poor foreigners who don't know what this is all about. But it's an economic imbalance that has created all this uncertainty in the country.
Okay, thank you, Clive. Now, Chris, you operate in the investment sector. That's your forte. How has the riot impacted investments? How do foreign investors look at South Africa?
Well, I think South Africa has been relatively uninvestable for a while. And if you have a look at numbers like the gross fixed capital formation, in other words, the investment levels in the economy, it's been declining. I think it's sub 14% at this stage, whereas it should be above 25% or more. And basically, if you have a look at, and where I echo with Clive, is that the whole riots were basically an internal faction fight with the ANC. The ANC actually was a losing faction. They attacked the rest of society. I think it did shock Ramaphosa. I think he's quite sincere in terms of what he's reflecting, but unfortunately, those riots were a direct responsibility or direct result of internal ANC factions. And when you look at the actual social disaffection of high unemployment, high levels of inequality, high levels of poverty, that's also, and South Africa is sitting at unusual levels of, in other words, it's not, if you take a look at the trend in the last 10 years, in most of the rest of the world, certainly in South Africa's peers, emerging markets, and that unemployment has been coming down as a trend. South Africa, it's been not only starting off very high, but it's been trending up as well. And so South Africa is an outlier. You're not seeing these things elsewhere in the world, or certainly very, very few examples, maybe Venezuela, North Korea, that type of thing. And that's
so what's responsible for this, Chris? Because the world went through the great disruptor, the COVID-19 pandemic. They're still dealing with its effects. Is that the only thing that is responsible for downturn in South Africa's economy?
No. What I'm saying is that the problems that South Africa sees internally are self-inflicted. South Africa's uninvestability is because of domestic financial repression type of policies in terms of overregulation and a very, very ineffective state where you've got very high levels of taxes. That is the tax rates are uncompetitive, and what you're getting for your taxes is abysmal. So in other words, you've got an enormous shift of resources from a highly capable private sector to an incapable government sector. And that's part of the reason why you're actually seeing effectively stagnation in the economy, is because you're shifting resources from high multiplier activities to low multiplier activities. In that we've got the government's obsession with poverty alleviation policies as opposed to poverty reduction. In other words, from an economic point of view, poverty alleviation is shifting resources to consumption, whereas poverty reduction would be shifting resources to investment. We're not seeing that investment, especially in small businesses. I'll just give you an example. In Gauteng province, for instance, there's a 500 million rand fund set aside to help support small businesses. If we're actually serious about a solution to South Africa's problem, they need 250 billion to even remotely actually cut through that. But small, medium enterprises are literally being shut out of the economy. It's been the biggest casualty of the COVID relief. The COVID relief measures always had the disclaimer that no civil servants were harmed in the formulation of these regulations. It was only small businesses and the lowest paid workers that had to bear the brunt of the actual COVID regulations. And the COVID regulations came on top of as I say, a regulatory debacle in South Africa, where we really have made ourselves, we've really shut the country out for business. And it actually shows. And that's why we've got an unemployment rate of about 35%, which is it really is an unusual outlier when you look at the rest of the world. And again, when you look at the recovery potential, the recovery of South Africa is much more muted than you are seeing other countries rebounding from COVID. And
now staying with you, Chris, just before I move to Clive, rebuilding South Africa after a crisis as big as South Africa witnessed last year can be a bit challenging. Do you see the government of today committed to doing this in light of the present economic realities?
As I said, the shock of those riots last year was the fact that the actual ruling party itself were behind it. It wasn't the whole of the ruling party, it was factions in the ruling party. And that makes it very difficult for citizens then to actually say, how do you actually respond to that? How do you respond to it when you've got such extreme levels of corruption, when that affects trust and investment, and we need investment to resolve our problems? It really is makes it extremely difficult to actually go on from a confidence point of view. The president is trying hard, but of course, words are falling short of actual actions that are needed. We need red tape cut. We need the tax rates to be put into a more competitive position, for instance.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Now to Clive. During the hearing, President Ramaphosa said the investigations to find the suspected masterminds behind the riots were ongoing, but some critics are concerned about the delay in this. Looking forward to the proceedings of the Human Rights Commission, do you see any positive, do you see the Commission yielding any positive results as we conclude?
Well, I think it's it's a lovely gesture, I think, to have the Human Rights Commission. You know, South Africa, we've just spent, by the way, 1.1 billion rand on a commission to interrogate and investigate corruption that was left by the Guptas a couple of years ago. That report has just recently been released to the president. What's going to be the outcome? Is that going to yield any results? Is there anybody getting arrested? No one is arrested. That's one. Two, we have a way of dealing with these things in a democratic way, which is brilliant. Of course, we want to find out and have an investigation to the reasons why we saw those riots. But the truth of the matter is we know the reality. The reality is intelligence picked up that there was going to be a problem in the country. Intelligence failed, as the president said, to act appropriately, to respond adequately, to make sure that there are measures taken through all the cluster of security to make sure that this does not happen. They failed dismally to do so. The question is, what makes us believe that the next time there'll be a better response? And Chris highlighted some of the problems, because obviously you've got a cabinet that is also split by the African National Congress, who's in power, who have people who are pulling backwards and forwards, who don't believe or even have the same vision for the country. And so depending on who gets the information, one might be plagued as one side of the scale and not be able to take the action that is appropriate to actually deal with the problem. And so you're sitting with the problem that the president, even though he would love to have the amount of power that he likes, that he can yield, his own colleagues, his own comrades are failing him dismally in implementing any of his strategies. And the little of those who have come onto his side, the little bit of those who do believe him, are facing the same internal squabbles that are creating a really unconducive environment for an economy that's sensitive as South Africa, which is predominantly based in resources.
I would like to say a big thank you to you, gentlemen, Chris, Hart, and Clive Ramathibela-Smith. We'll need to have a special to go through all of the intricate details of this inquiry. I would say a big thank you to you, and thanks for your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you.